You know that feeling when you click Add to Cart on a replacement part, stare at the glossy product photos, and convince yourself it's the perfect fix for that stubborn mower that started stuttering? Then you get the box, wrestle with the heavy cardboard, and realize the part either doesn't bolt up the way the picture promised or it just doesn't solve the problem you were hoping to fix. It's a tiny but maddening risk every DIY mower owner faces, especially when you're dealing with something as critical as a transmission component on a CUB Cadet zero-turn. I've spent a good chunk of last weekend swapping out a few old parts on my own mower, reading forum threads, and comparing OEM numbers, so I wanted to break down whether the CUB Cadet 918044331B actually lives up to the hype or if it's another disappointment you can avoid. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's get clear on what this part actually is. It's the OEM-listed transmission component that CUB Cadet uses on several of its zero-turn models. The part number matches the original equipment on machines that list 918044331A or 618044331B as a compatible piece, so if your mower's service manual points you to any of those numbers, you're looking at a direct fit. That's the main selling point. You're not buying a generic fit-in transmission piece that might need a lot of improvising. In theory, an OEM part should slide in, bolt down, and get the mower back to its original performance without you having to hunt for adapters or extra washers. Now, the real question is whether that theory translates into everyday usability. The first thing I noticed when the box arrived was the packaging. It's a simple cardboard sleeve with a clear plastic window, nothing fancy. Inside, the component is wrapped in a thin protective film, and the label lists the part numbers and a brief note about compatibility. There's no extra hardware, no installation guide beyond a one-page PDF you have to download from the manufacturer's site. For a seasoned mower mechanic, that's fine, but if you're a weekend gardener who only pulls the mower out a few times a year, the lack of a printed step-by-step can be a hurdle. Installation is where the rubber meets the road. The transmission sits under the deck, accessed by removing the mower's rear panel and a couple of bolts that hold the housing in place. In my experience, the fit is exact once you line up the bolt holes. The piece seats flush with the surrounding metal. That's a plus, because you don't have to fight with gaps or try to shim the part in. However, the torque spec for the bolts is not printed on the part itself, so you need to refer back to the service manual. Miss a torque spec and you could end up with a loose connection that creates vibration, or you could over-tighten and strip the threads. The part itself doesn't have any built-in features to help you gauge that, so you're relying on your own tools and knowledge. What about performance after the swap? I ran the mower through a full yard, cutting a mix of tall grass and a few patches of weeds. The engine revved smoothly, and the transmission shifted without the hitch I'd been hearing before the replacement. That said, the improvement felt more like a return to baseline rather than a boost. If you were dealing with a worn-out gear set that caused jerky motion, this OEM piece restores the original feel, but it won't magically make an older engine run like new. That's an important nuance for folks who might hope a new part will give the whole mower a performance upgrade. The rating on Amazon sits at 2.7 out of 5 stars from just 11 reviews. That's a small sample, but it tells us something. The part isn't universally loved. While I couldn't find detailed buyer comments to pinpoint exact complaints, a low average usually hints at issues like fit problems on certain model years, or perhaps a perception that the price is too high for an OEM part when comparable aftermarket options exist. If you're budgeting tightly, keep that in mind. The part isn't cheap, and you're paying for the brand name and the guarantee that it matches the original specification. So, who should actually buy this CUB Cadet 918044331B? The answer is pretty straightforward. Anyone who owns a CUB Cadet zero-turn that specifically lists 918044331A, 618044331B, or the exact OEM number on the service sheet and needs a direct replacement because the transmission component is cracked, worn, or completely broken. If you've already opened your mower, identified the faulty piece, and confirmed the part number, this is a safe bet. It's also a good choice if you're uncomfortable with the idea of a generic part that might require additional modifications. The OEM label means you won't have to guess about compatibility. On the flip side, skip it if you fall into one of these categories. First, if you have a newer CUB Cadet model that